When deputies from the Spartanburg County, South Carolina's Sheriff's Department went to the property of Todd Kohlhepp, they did not know what to expect. They were on the hunt for a missing couple whose families had not seen in several months. After months of few leads and not much to go on, the investigators got a break when cell phone records confirmed that their last known location was Todd Kohlhepp's rural 95-acre property. With this evidence in hand, police obtained a search warrant to see if the missing couple was indeed at the property. Soon after arriving at the property, in the corner of woods tucked away not far from Kohlhepp's house, was a shipping container, also known as a Connex box. The Connex box was quite strange. While most might have a single padlock on them, this one had 5 heavy-duty locks all around the front of it. It definitely looked odd. As police started investigating it further, they heard a woman screaming inside, begging for someone to save her. Hearing the woman's screams, police soon obtained a saw that could easily cut through the steel locks and bars, keeping the door shut. The anxiety the police felt was palpable, and they had no idea what awaited them inside. While they had a good idea that at least one innocent woman was trapped inside, they had no idea if there were other victims, or if a madman would also be waiting for them once they opened the door. With the last lock cut, deputies slowly advanced with guns drawn to see what was inside. To their relief, no gunman was lying in wait. The only person inside the Connex box was the missing woman they had been searching for, Kayla Brown. Her and her boyfriend, Charles Carver, had gone missing several months before after answering a job ad posted by Kohlhepp on Craigslist. As police closed in on her, what met them shocked them. Kayla was chained to the floor of the Connex box by a chain attached to a dog collar. Lying on a filthy mattress and clearly having lost a ton of weight, Kayla looked as stressed and gaunt as she'd ever been, but thankful to be alive. Soon after her rescue, Kayla began talking to detectives about what he had done with her boyfriend Charlie. Even without corroborating what Kayla said next, police already had more than enough evidence to charge him with kidnapping. After arresting him at his home, police officers brought him into the interrogation room, even though he had initially declined to speak with police regarding Kayla's kidnapping. Once Kohlhepp began talking to police at the Spartanburg County Jail, they soon realized that this case was far bigger than just the disappearance of Kayla and Charlie. Kohlhepp confessed to an astounding 7 homicides, and it was only at that time did police realize they had a serial killer on their hands. After this initial confession, police brought him back to headquarters for a formal videotaped confession. While Kohlhepp talked, perhaps what surprised everyone the most was that he simply did not look like a serial killer. Standing at 5 feet 11 inches tall and weighing about 300 pounds, Kohlhepp was a gentle giant of sorts, or at least it seemed so. Trying to figure out how such a man could deceive so many people and fly under the police radar for so long would confuse even the most experienced detectives. In order to better understand how Kohlhepp became the monster he is, it's best to start at the beginning. Born to parents in a rocky marriage in Florida in 1971, Kohlhepp moved around a lot as his mother moved from job to job and relationship to relationship throughout Georgia and Florida. She finally met a man she wanted to marry and wed his stepfather the following year after her divorce. Growing up, Kohlhepp held nothing but disdain for his stepfather. It's unclear why he did this, since there were never any reports or accusations of abuse from the household. Nevertheless, Kohlhepp's mother described him as being just a constantly angry person to be around even as a child. Due to his constant fits of rage, Kohlhepp would smash furniture with a hammer, knock holes in the wall, and cause other destruction inside the house. His anger was so frequent and so constant that each night Kohlhepp's mother resorted to locking him into his room and herself into her own room. Perhaps even scarier than his frequent fits of rage was his obsession with hurting animals. Though Kohlhepp never admitted to these things, in interviews with his mother, she vividly remembers several instances of animal abuse. The one that stuck out the most to her was when he killed his goldfish by pouring Clorox bleach into the fishbowl. When asked why he did it, Kohlhepp responded that he wanted to watch the fish die. Kohlhepp's anger issues extended outside the home too. Because of his quick temper, he isolated all his classmates around him. Because of his inability to make friends and socialize with other students his age, he was actually committed to a psychiatric facility to figure out what was wrong with him. It's unclear what, if any, diagnosis he was given, but after several months was released back into the custody of his mother and stepfather. In 1983, Kohlhepp's mother finally had enough and relented in agreeing to his wishes that he goes to Arizona to live with his biological father. Kohlhepp's mother agreed to this probably because of a few things. Firstly, she was simply tired of dealing with this problem child. Secondly, Kohlhepp still harbored an unadulterated hatred of his stepfather for no apparent reason other than that he was not his biological father. In her mind, sending him to live with his biological father might curb his anger issues and get him to act normal again. Soon after arriving to live in Arizona, he took his father's surname Kohlhepp as his own. It's unclear who his original Samsil surname belonged to, and perhaps this could have caused some of Kohlhepp's resentment towards his mother. Was it her maiden name or a lover's surname? That remains unclear, but if it were a lover's surname, this would explain why he hated his stepfather so much, as he could have blamed him for being the one that forced his biological father out of his life. Regardless of the reason, Kohlhepp soon settled into his new life in Arizona. Though just 12 years old, Kohlhepp worked various jobs to help keep the house afloat, including as a waiter at his father's barbecue restaurant. Life seemed to be getting better for Kohlhepp. Now that he was living with his father, he seemed to calm down and adjusted well to his new environment. At least, at first. As Kohlhepp continued growing up in his adolescent years, his violent sexual urges that psychiatrists noted when he was a young boy started to reemerge. Only now, being bigger and stronger, he could act on these violent urges. They finally came to a head one day when he was just 15 years old. Kohlhepp had sexual fantasies about a fellow classmate of his, and she had continually rebuffed his advances. Kohlhepp convinced the young girl to come over to his house one day under the false pretense that a mutual friend wanted to speak with her. Once at his home, Kohlhepp attacked. He bound, gagged, and raped the young girl. When he was finished, he walked her home just 3 houses down and told her that he would kill her younger siblings if she ever spoke about this. Undeterred by his threats, the girl immediately went to the police and reported her assault and rape. When the police came looking for Kohlhepp, they found him waiting at his house, almost expecting them. Before the police could say or do anything, Kohlhepp apparently uttered the phrase, "So how much time am I going to get for that?" Not surprisingly, he was quickly charged for his assault on his classmate. Numerous court and defense psychologists interviewed him as part of a pre-sentencing report and found him to be a sexually violent predator. In the words of the psychologists, Kohlhepp had no remorse and felt that he would do other such violent acts if given a chance. Because of these findings, the judge accepted his guilty plea, but sentenced him to the maximum punishment he could at the time, 15 years in state prison with no chance of parole. Once he was serving time in prison, though he had a rocky first few years with some minor rules infractions and fighting, Kohlhepp was otherwise a model inmate. He held down a lucrative prison job as a graphic designer as part of the prison work program. He even obtained a Bachelor of Science degree in computer programming as part of a distance learning program a local college had with the prison. Why he was able to change his behavior for the better and become educated while in prison was due to his above-average IQ. As part of his pre-trial tests, his IQ test scored him an impressive 118. While not genius level, it was still impressive and could help explain how this monster was able to hide in plain sight. After serving 14 years of his sentence, he was released from prison and soon moved to South Carolina, where his mother was now living. After getting accepted for a lucrative computer programming and graphic design job, Kohlhepp started saving money and seemed like he was becoming a productive member of society for the first time in his life. However, it was here that his pattern of lies and manipulation showed that it had not gone away because of his prison time. To get this first job, he lied about being incarcerated for the past 14 years and listed the prison company that he worked for while in Arizona. After doing this job for a few years, Kohlhepp decided he wanted to get into real estate. On the state real estate agent's application, he lied about having a felony on his record and was soon approved to hold a real estate license. Probably due to his friendly charm and non-threatening personality, Kohlhepp actually became a very successful real estate agent. He became so successful, in fact, that over the course of the next decade, he built a small real estate empire that had 12 employees and was doing millions of dollars in sales each year. During this time period from 2001 to his arrest in 2016, Kohlhepp had no known interactions with law enforcement. Despite a few civil issues for a bad real estate deal and improper signage, Kohlhepp's interaction with police and the courtroom was non-existent. For all intents and purposes, Kohlhepp was living the American dream. After getting a fresh start, he went to another South Carolina college and pursued a degree in business administration marketing since his Arizona degree did not transfer to the area. He built his own company from scratch and seemed to have a knack for getting friendly with strangers as part of his business. But despite all of these positive factors, something dark still lurked just below the surface of this facade: anger. In fact, it was anger, he said, that drove him to commit his first confirmed homicides in South Carolina. Once in police custody, Kohlhepp began to confess to all the crimes he'd committed since being back in South Carolina. The first and most notorious of these crimes was the infamous Superbike Motorsports store shooting. On November 6, 2003, a customer walked into the Superbike store on a balmy afternoon to find a scene of absolute horror. The store manager, Brian Lucas, was lying face up in the parking lot, dead from multiple gunshot wounds. Just inside the store, the owner, Scott Ponder, lay face down in the store's showroom. Just inside the door leading to the maintenance bay was Scott's mother, Beverly Guy, who worked as his bookkeeper. Inside the maintenance bay, slumped beside a motorcycle he'd been worked on, was the mechanic for that day, Chris Sherbert. Police soon started looking for the killer. According to the eyewitness that discovered the scene, he had seen a green Ford Ranger driving nearby. His description of the driver was soon plastered all over the media in the hunt for the madman. However, what the witness described was all wrong. The real killer, Kohlhepp, had driven away in an SUV and had never been in contact with the eyewitness. It would not be until 13 years later, when Kohlhepp was arrested for Caleb Brown's kidnapping, that police would finally learn the truth of what happened. Kohlhepp told police it all started when he went in to buy a motorcycle. He said that he had never ridden one before and wanted to buy one. He was hoping that the store employees would be willing to show him how to ride a motorcycle. He claimed during the first encounter that they agreed to show him the basics and let him ride in a field behind the store. According to Kohlhepp, the field was full of chest-high grass and was unsuitable for riding. After going a short distance, Kohlhepp inevitably fell off the motorcycle. Scott, Brian, and other store employees apparently laughed at him. Kohlhepp was apparently embarrassed by this, but still wanted to purchase a motorcycle. He would often go into the store after work or between college classes to sit on some of the bikes and talk to the employees about them. Kohlhepp claimed, in his words, that all the employees there talked shit about him in front of him. Though this irritated him, he still never understood why he kept going back to the store. Nevertheless, Kohlhepp eventually decided to buy a motorcycle from Scott. It was a very nice motorcycle with a powerful engine. Kohlhepp soon had buyer's remorse when the powerful bike was simply too much for him to ride safely or comfortably. Kohlhepp said he went back to the store to return the bike and get a refund of his money. He claims that Scott and Brian laughed at him, stating that they would take the bike back but would not refund him his money. Kohlhepp's situation apparently got even worse when he says that someone stole the motorcycle from outside his home. He said that he filed a police report, paid the $1,000 deductible on the loss, and then went back to the Superbike store. Kohlhepp claimed that he asked Scott and Brian if they would do anything to help him in his situation. Given the circumstances, he was trying to get either a partial refund of the bike's price or a steep discount on another motorcycle. According to him, the duo laughed in his face once more. He also claimed that Scott said, "Don't worry about the bike since this shit is probably already on its way to Florida." The interjection angered Kohlhepp and pushed him past his breaking point. Not only had the employees in his mind mocked and made fun of him over the past several months, but they also refused to let him return the bike he bought, and now they were insinuating they had stolen the motorcycle they had sold him. In Kohlhepp's version of events, he had enough, and now it was time to take matters into his own hands to avenge these supposed wrongs. On the day that Kohlhepp decided to commit the murders, he came during the day when most of the customers would be at work. According to Kohlhepp's own words, he wanted to avoid collateral damage on anyone who was not an employee of the store. After doing his usual routine of sitting on the bikes and making small talk, the last customer left. Now it was only Kohlhepp and the 4 employees inside the store. After walking around the bike to the open maintenance bay, Kohlhepp could see Chris working on a motorcycle. He calmly walked around the motorcycle, drew his gun, and fired twice into his chest. Chris never knew what hit him. At this point, within 2 to 3 seconds, the remaining people in the store rushed toward the maintenance bay, and Kohlhepp literally came face to face with them in the doorway. He then shot Scott's mother twice, and then Scott and Brian ran for their lives. Kohlhepp emptied his magazine into the 2 remaining men. Scott crumpled into his own showroom floor, while Brian was shot in the main doorway and fell into the parking lot. Kohlhepp reloaded his pistol, walked up to Brian, and shot him several more times, including a round to the forehead. He then went back inside and shot each person 1 more time in the forehead for good measure. Once this was done, he calmly got back into his car and drove home. After getting home, Kohlhepp apparently disassembled the gun and put its various pieces into the trash. The barrel went into his cat litter, while the receiver went into the kitchen trash, and so on. And that was the last Kohlhepp had thought of the crime until confessing to it 13 years later. Perhaps what's most shocking about his police interview is just how narcissistic Kohlhepp truly is. When describing the events leading up to the superbike shooting, Kohlhepp goes into unnecessary details about the firearm he used. While simply stating that he had used a Beretta 92 FS pistol would have sufficed, he continued to go into detail about unrelated facts regarding the handgun. The fact that the extended aftermarket magazines were not available at the time, or that some of these pistols had devices on them to make them shoot faster was unnecessary, and the interviewer had to continually push Kohlhepp back on topic. Why Kohlhepp would talk about unrelated facts shows that he wants people to know just how smart he is, and that he feels the need to tell police about what all he's done since his crimes have been so perfect no one could have caught him otherwise. Even more disturbing than his twisted sense of reality of trying to convince everyone how smart he is are the words he used to describe the attack itself. After telling police how he shot Chris, he then stated that police would have been so proud he cleared that building in under 30 seconds. While it's hard to believe the police would ever be proud of a murderer, this sick sense of accomplishment and trying to somehow relate to the tactical training law enforcement personnel receive shows that even in this moment, he's trying to win over the police to his side. In describing how he shot each of the victims, he calls the shooting not his best work. Why he would use that term to explain his actions shows how he sees himself as this expertly trained tactical marksman that the police should somehow envy. He also reminds the police 3 or 4 times about how good his reload was when he transitioned from shooting Scott to Brian. While these narcissistic and sick comments are certainly repulsive, they are important for understanding Kohlhepp's frame of mind. He sees himself as an incredibly intelligent and easygoing guy with vast knowledge of firearms and experience. He wants everyone to know just how great he is, and that he's just that much smarter than everyone else. The only problem is that the only person who sees Todd Kohlhepp like that is Kohlhepp himself. To everyone else, he's just a monster who somehow got lucky because he was a chameleon of sorts. It also helped that his remaining crimes took place on a remote piece of property he owned, far from the public's prying eyes. Just along the North Carolina state line, Kohlhepp bought an expansive 95-acre property. Consisting of virgin forests, this heavily wooded area was supposed to be Kohlhepp's getaway from the world. While that may be true, it also became the tomb for 3 people and the prison for another. When Kohlhepp was outfitting his property, along with having an $80,000 fence installed around the perimeter of it, he also had several Connex boxes placed on the property. It was during this time that the infamous Amazon reviews were left. While unknown at the time, the Amazon reviews were discovered after his arrest. While made under an anonymous username, the profile was later confirmed to be linked to Kohlhepp's account. On over 130 items from locks to knives to shovels to flashlights, Kohlhepp left creepy and, at face value, somewhat sarcastic reviews. For example, under a knife, he wrote that he had not stabbed anyone yet, but that if he ever did, it would be with a quality tool like that one. For a set of locks that the police later found on the Connex box keeping Kayla captive, he said that these locks were great for locking people up. For a small portable shovel, Kohlhepp said that it was a great tool for burying bodies. At the time, probably no one thought much of these reviews. People that read them could have just taken them as a sick, off-brand joke. But after police uncovered the totality of his crimes, it quickly became apparent that Kohlhepp had not been joking at all. In fact, these comments made in 2014 would soon get put to the test for his next set of crimes in 2015. Why Kohlhepp waited to act on his sexual urges and fantasies almost 30 years after his first rape and over a decade after the murders is unclear. Perhaps Kohlhepp wanted time to save money to plan the perfect assault and murder. After all, he had been caught after his first attempt, and maybe this time he wanted to ensure he would not be caught. Working for years to save money for a murder property would not be out of the realm of possibility, considering his intelligence and ability to plan crimes ahead of time, like the Superbike murders. During his planning stage, after setting up his property, Kohlhepp then had to select a victim. Kohlhepp was known around town as being creepy, and few women had anything to do with him. In fact, at his favorite Waffle House restaurant in town, he had scared the female waitstaff so much that whenever he came in to eat, a male cook would take his order. It was here that he met his next victim, Megan Lee McCraw-Coxey. Megan worked as a waitress at that Waffle House, and like all the other women there, Kohlhepp was unsuccessful in winning her over. However, all that would change when he found her walking along the side of the road one day. He said, after approaching her, he felt sorry for her and wanted to help her out. For, you see, Megan had substance abuse issues and mental health problems and was losing custody of her children. Because of this, even though she normally would have never even spoken to Kohlhepp, his promise of a job maintaining the property, a place to stay, and some cash was too good of an offer to pass up. After mulling it over with her husband Johnny, they both agreed they would take Kohlhepp up on his offer, and he happily agreed. After picking the couple up at a local gas station a week before Christmas of 2015, Kohlhepp claims that he took them to his property, where things soon turned sour. According to Kohlhepp, Johnny pulled a knife on him and tried to rob him. Kohlhepp reacted by getting out of the car and shooting him once in the chest. He then circled around to the passenger side and shot him again. He claimed that when Johnny pulled the knife, that his wife, Megan, did not react at all like she knew they were going to rob him. Because of this, Kohlhepp pulled Megan out of the car and held her at gunpoint while he thought of his next move. After calming her down, Kohlhepp placed her in handcuffs and led her to the Connex box nearby. He would later claim that this Connex box had always been intended for use as a storage facility for his copious amounts of ammunition. However, his Amazon review posts from the year before would cast doubt on these claims. Once calming Megan down enough to be coherent, he buried Johnny's body. He placed it in the bucket of a tractor he owned, dug a hole, and unceremoniously dumped him inside. He says that this took him the rest of the day. After this was complete, he said he still had no idea what to do with Megan. He was faced with a dilemma here. On one hand, he claimed he did not want her to go to the police, which was probably true. On the other hand, he wanted her gone from his property, which is also probably true. But according to Kohlhepp, his plan of getting her away from the property consisted of driving her to Tennessee, dropping her off, and giving her $4,000 to stay away and start a new life. Kohlhepp said that Megan was quite happy with the supposed arrangement. However, Kohlhepp did not do this immediately. since he needed to get a good weather window for driving such a long distance and time off work to do it. While he waited, he kept Megan locked up in the Connex box. He'd feed her once a day, and each time he would go into the box, she had set something else on fire. Whether it was her mattress, a pillow, a fan, or something, she had destroyed it. Kohlhepp became increasingly angry about the fires inside his Connex box. Because of all the ammunition stored there, he did not want it all going off, which was a fair assessment. Whether he was concerned about this or the attention it would draw from police and fire department officials probably also factored into his calculus. After about a week of constantly starting fires from the cigarettes and lighter he had provided her, on or about Christmas Day 2015, Kohlhepp finally snapped. He claimed that he went to feed her this time. Not only had she set fire once again to the Connex box, but that she'd destroyed all the ammunition racks inside. Blind with rage over this incident, he took her out of the box and shot her in the back of the head. He then buried her body alongside her husband. Once Kohlhepp had committed these murders, he waited for almost a year before striking again. Why he waited is again a mystery and something that only Kohlhepp knows. One plausible theory is that he did, in fact, lose control of the situation and wanted to make sure that it did not happen again. What is clear is that he struck again on August 2016. Kohlhepp used the same ruse as the last time, but instead placed a job ad on Craigslist. He was interested in a couple that would help maintain his property and keep his house clean. The offer of free rent and a decent paycheck was too much for couple Kayla Brown and Charlie Carver to pass up. They quickly responded to the ad and met Kohlhepp at his rural property. According to Kohlhepp, the reason why he killed Charlie was because he had a smart mouth. However, the likely reason is that he did not want any resistance and immediately took out the only threat to his safety. After shooting Charlie twice and detaining Kayla like he did Megan, he buried Charlie's body next to the other two victims. Once Kayla was inside the Connex box, her several months of captivity filled with rape, torture, and abuse began. Kayla would later recall that during her captivity, Kohlhepp would tell her that he did not believe in rape and that if she did not want to have sex with him, he would just kill her. Of course, to save her own life, Kayla relented to his assaults, if only to make it to the next day. Inside the Connex box, Kayla was kept inside a cage like a diver would use for interacting with sharks. She had a moldy single twin mattress and some small sheets that made her bed inside. Kayla would later recount that most of her days and all of her assaults would happen inside that Connex box. Sometimes Kohlhepp would take mercy on her and let her get some fresh air outside. Otherwise, she stayed inside the box. While all this was happening, both their families filed missing persons reports. The investigation into their disappearance went nowhere until some eerie messages started popping up on Charlie's Facebook account. The person claiming to be Charlie stated that he and Kayla were fine. They had gotten married and people should no longer look for them. When friends and family questioned the person, the messages they got back were cryptic and evasive. Knowing that someone had been using Charlie's Facebook account to act like him, police were able to obtain a warrant for their cell phone records. Both of their cell phones had last pinged off the tower next to Kohlhepp's property. After getting a search warrant to look for the missing couple on Kohlhepp's property, 2 months and a week after her disappearance, police heard her screams coming from the Connex box. Once she'd been freed, Kayla immediately told police what had happened, and Kohlhepp was soon arrested for her kidnapping, as that was all they could prove at that time. It would be later that day when Kohlhepp confessed at the jail, and later that night when he made his videotaped confession at the sheriff's office. But before Kohlhepp made his confession, he asked for 3 wishes to be granted. First, he wanted to be able to tell his mother everything that happened first before he confessed to the police. Second, he wanted to give her a photograph. Lastly, he wanted to transfer money to the college fund of a friend's daughter. All these requests were granted in exchange for his confession. Once Kohlhepp had confessed, he led police to the makeshift graves of his 3 other victims, whose remains were all recovered like he said they would be. In exchange for taking the death penalty off the table, Kohlhepp agreed to plead guilty to 7 homicides, rape, kidnapping, and various other charges. He was sentenced to life without parole plus 60 years for his crimes. But that would not be the end of Kohlhepp's story. According to him, he confessed to committing at least 2 other murders in South Carolina and 1 in Arizona. Police have tried to corroborate his stories and even went to a dump site he claimed to have put the 2 bodies, but this search turned up nothing. Police have suspected him of committing other homicides, but as of the publishing of this video, no concrete evidence has tied him to any more victims. This will probably continue to be the case because of who Kohlhepp is as a person. If he had really committed any other homicides, he would have bragged to investigators about them.